Hello and welcome to the Thursday, March 6, 2025 board workshop meeting. Today we are at Middle School West and the board just had an amazing tour by Kiev. We learned about the houses here. We saw amazing art. We saw the self-regulating section in the gym, the word of the day, and math boards. Just everything. We're just so super impressed, and so appreciate the tour and appreciate the time here. Mr. Hetzel, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Coates?
Here.
Mrs. Horn?
Here.
Mrs. Dimmerling?
Here.
Mr. Manley? Here. Mrs. Mooring?
Here.
And will everyone please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This flag.
Are there any recommended changes to tonight's agenda?
Not this evening.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Horn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Any discussion? Mr. Hetzel, can you please call it?
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mrs. Dimmerling?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And we will move on to the special presentations part of our agenda where Mrs. Reed is here with a stay interview data presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, President Coates and members of the board, to speak to you tonight. I know I have mentioned stay interviews a couple of times over the course of this year, so I was anxiously awaiting my opportunity to have the floor with the board to be able to share this information. So I'm really excited to give you guys a little bit more details about what we've engaged in over the course of the last year. So as you know, we've talked a lot about year one priority in our strategic plan being retention, and stay interviews is a big part of that. It's a way for us to engage our staff in a meaningful dialogue around their perspectives about what's happening in the district and to better understand their needs. And then we can figure out how we need to allocate our resources to make sure that we're supporting our staff's needs. And hopefully it'll allow us to be proactive in those responses too, not waiting until something becomes a problem to be able to respond to that. So this is
Can I ask you to speak just a little bit louder with the background noise?
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's just a little bit hard to hear you.
I will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's true.
Okay. So the first part that I'd like to share with you is just regarding the participants and how they were selected. Kara, I think you had a question about the selection process. So we did a couple of things. We did ask for our supervisors to provide us a list of recommended members of our staff to interview. We also sent out a participation survey. So we allowed our staff members to volunteer to participate in the stay interviews. And then we also had some that were randomly selected. So the group is made up of, all of those different types of people that were selected. As you can see from this particular slide, I also tried to, from that group, make a diverse representation of our staff members. So making sure that each level was represented, making sure that a varied level of experience was represented, and then as many job classifications as I could include were represented. So as you can see, from those that I interviewed, 32% were either pre-K or elementary level, 26% were at the middle school level, 15% were at the high school level, and 29% were at the district level. The years of experience in terms of participants, we had 53% between 0 and 9 years of experience in the district, 26% between 10 and 19 years of experience, and 21% either 20 years of experience or above. And then finally, with job classification, we had 56% of our participants that were in the certificated category. We had 26% classified and 18% that were administrators.
So how many total did you interview?
And I told you, I had it written right there.
Okay.
So 45 were invited to participate and 34 were interviewed. Thanks, so.
And what's our total population?
Total staff?
Yeah.
About 1,200. So as I've shared before, the process was just overwhelmingly positive. I wasn't really sure what to expect going into a situation where I'm one-on-one with somebody and just asking them for feedback. And it was really so refreshing to sit down and be able to speak to our staff members. They were very committed to the process. They were giving authentic feedback, and they were very thoughtful, I feel, about the things that they brought to me to share about the district. So I wanted to start with some positives because, like I said, it was overwhelmingly positive. And a few of the quotes that I pulled out that I really felt were impactful was, first of all, that first one, the opportunity is here for those who want it. It's my plan to retire in Gahanna. I just thought that's amazing. One person said, the fact that you want my opinion is of value to me. So they really appreciated the opportunity for the state interviews. And then it says, one of our participants said, what a statement that I never thought about looking somewhere else. I've always felt satisfied. Gahanna helped me grow. Gahanna is super supportive. So you can see lots of other comments there, but lots of positive comments from the participants. So we're going to get into just kind of a play-by-play of each of the questions that were asked, and the percentages that I provided they're not a total percentage of the responses. Essentially what I did was I went through each question and I looked at which pieces of information would constitute a pattern. So the percentage is attributed to the percentage of participants who responded with that piece of information. So with this particular question, for example, the question is, what's the best part of your job? 68% of the respondents said working with students in some way, shape, or form. 35% said working with a team. 18% mentioned helping others. 14% said the flexibility or autonomy that they have with their position. And 5% said seeing success. So when they feel like they're successful in their role, that's the best part of their job. So multiple participants could have said those same things, and some participants may not have said anything that constituted a pattern. So it's not going to equal that 100%, it's just going to be the percentage of people that said that particular piece of information. Question 2 was, what part of your job do you wish you could cut out? So, not surprisingly, probably 21% of them said paperwork, 18% said meetings, 9% said testing, 9% said behavior, 9% said parents, and 9% said lack of autonomy. So of course, whenever you're getting those individual perspectives, you're going to get that difference. Some people see things as strengths and others might see them as weaknesses depending on their position. In terms of paperwork, I do feel that many of the participants who shared about that were in special education. So those participants do have quite a bit more paperwork that they have to complete, but not all of them. Meetings, that was really a varied response. Some of them felt like the meetings they went to weren't really attributable to their work and not necessarily the best use of their time. Some just felt like they had a lot of meetings, things like that. With parents, I think mostly that was in regards to, Deanna, I know you had a question about that. Just hoping that they would have had more positive interactions with parents. Some of the interactions were negative and that never feels good. So I'm just looking for those more positive experiences. With question 3, we were asking, what would make your job even more satisfying? And I mean, how amazing is it that 29% said nothing? Yeah. Like they wouldn't change anything about their job. I thought that was pretty awesome. 18% said more planning and collaboration time, which is probably not surprising to any of us. 9% said their schedule. They wish their schedule was a little bit, more in line with their family needs, things like that. And then 9% said they just feel like we need more staff to support our work in the buildings. For question 4, we asked, how do you feel about the balance between your work and personal life? And this was another surprising answer to me. 76% of the respondents really had a positive response in regards to their work and personal life. I will tell you that particularly the more experienced staff members frequently responded that it got easier the more experience that they had, which makes sense. And the younger teachers were feeling a little bit more overwhelmed because lots of things are new. Only 8% responded, negatively in terms of their work-life balance, and then 6% didn't really commit one way or the other. Again, we know that this is a small sample size, but the majority of those negative responses were from administrators. So they're definitely feeling a little bit more of that pressure with their work-life balance than some of the other staff members. With question 5, we discussed, this was probably the hardest question for them to answer. They paused for a very long time thinking about this, and some of them, like you see, couldn't really come up with an answer. But what's one policy or rule you believe is outdated or unnecessary, and what change would you recommend? So 29% said they didn't really have one or couldn't think of one. 12% said that, again, that inflexibility in their work hours and just wishing that they can have a little bit more flexibility. And then 9% said dress code. And I know, Dion, you had asked about this as well. What was interesting about this was it was kind of, although a small percentage, two different perspectives. A couple of people had mentioned that they wished their colleagues would dress more professionally. And then a couple people mentioned that the student dress has changed a lot over the years, and they wished we would think a little bit more about those expectations. So it was a little bit of a split between what we were discussing.
Did they have any other comments with regard to the inflexible work hours? Like how would that work?
I can give you examples. So one example, sometimes related to home responsibilities. Teachers would say, if I have to stay late one night for a meeting, since I have like 30 minutes in the morning, would it be okay for me to come in 30 minutes later the next day? So some of those little like trade-offs, I think, for work hours. It also depended on the position. For example, people at central office, there's more ability for us to have flexibility in those hours. And so it was, why do we all have to work at the same time? If, I work better in the morning, is it okay for me to come in a little bit earlier and leave a little bit earlier? Could we think about those sort of things?
Okay.
Yeah. Question 6. Outside of raising your wages, are there any benefits that we could provide to you that would increase your satisfaction and willingness to stay in Gahanna? As you can see, 21% said insurance, and Sue, I know you had asked if we had any more context with that. So cost definitely came up, just overall the cost of insurance. Also talked about certain drug costs, some of them either not being covered or being more expensive. Several people actually talked about wellness programs, which we'll talk about here in a second. And then one person brought up something interesting that I can't recall if it's come up for Tracy in any of our insurance meetings, but it was a single parent with a child, and we don't have that option. We only have single or family. And so she was saying, could you do single, one dependent, things like that to make the cost more effective. So I thought that was a good idea. So the other percentages, wellness programs. So with the wellness programs, frequently mentioned discounted gym memberships. A lot of the more veteran staff members remember when we had the partnership with the Y and feeling like that was really helpful. And I know our insurance committee and Tracy and Cliff have been really working on how can we continue to get those wellness programs back into our offerings for our staff. Flexible work hours came up again in this question. 4-day work week came up a couple of times. A couple people mentioned that they like the personal day rollover option that we have for our staff now. And then a couple mentioned just more personal or vacation time would be welcomed. For question 7, we talked about if you were to leave Gahanna, what would be the #1 reason why? And again, I feel like this was overwhelmingly positive. 12% said they would consider leaving. Many people said, I'm not going to leave until I retire. A few people said I wouldn't leave Gahanna, but I would consider a different role or promotion. 12% did say that they felt overworked. 12% said they would leave potentially for more pay. And then again, that 12% with some they would leave for more flexibility or the opportunity to work from home.
Do you feel like that overworked in this category was administration or two, or do you maybe not remember? And that's fine.
I would say district level, not always administration. Some of the district level employees that I spoke to were some of our professional technical staff as well. And I do think it leaned more in that direction. Okay, question 8. What are your long-term career goals, and is there anything the district can do to help you achieve those goals? again, 29% said they're not really looking for a change. 21% talked about just wanting some additional professional growth, more so in their current role, not necessarily a different role. Again, 18% said, I'm gonna retire from Gehanna. 18% talked about wanting a leadership role, and that's definitely an area I think that we should dig into a little bit more as a leadership team. And then 15% said staying in Gehanna, but just maybe looking for a job that's a little bit different within the district. And then our last question was open-ended. Is there anything else that you would like to share? I will say that multiple times by the time we got to this question, the response was, wow, I feel like we really hit everything already that I was hoping to share today. So that was refreshing. But of the responses, they were all over the board, as you can imagine, based on their role or, different things. It was just a lot of good information. The patterns I was able to pull out were 24% just said they really love their job here in Gehanna. They appreciate their current role. 15% mentioned that our admin team is very supportive. 12% again reiterated that they feel a lot of pressure in their role, or they don't feel like they have enough time to complete their responsibilities. And then 9% talked about just having too many students on their caseloads or in their classrooms, and that that was creating some stress for them.
On the feel pressure, not enough time, was that skewed more to the percentage that were early in their career, or did that cross over?
I would say back to Megan's question, it was more district level employees and more veteran employees to, if I'm, thinking through the individuals that I spoke to that mentioned that.
I just want to highlight question number 8. I think that is such a good question, and it's really revealing in the big picture, and it's it's nice to hear. I mean, 1/5 are looking, like you mentioned, leadership, and roughly 1/5, and roughly a fifth for the professional growth, which is really inspiring. I would caution that those stats with maybe some people were hesitant to do this day interview because they had possibly more issues or criticism or things that will be hard to communicate, and maybe that's a avenue that we could think about how can we reach the people that are more resistant or hesitant or something like that. But overall, I love this question, and I think it just opens up so many avenues or insights.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Dion, and I agree with you. I hope that one of the ways that we can get people encouraged, I don't feel like, and you don't know what people are thinking, but I feel like a lot of people were really, really anxious and appreciative to be asked to participate, so that was refreshing. But one of the things that I'm really committed to is making sure that this information gets back out to people and that they hear about that there is some response from the feedback.
Right, yeah,
So
that's a good
hopefully
start.
that's what will
Yeah,
encourage them
that's
to
really
continue
good.
to participate in the future.
Well, especially
we just heard Principal Lamar say the same thing, that he got a lot of positive feedback when he was reaching out to families directly and asking for their input. I find that too, personally, on one-on-one interactions, people do really appreciate, they want to be heard,
They do.
but sometimes it takes.
But to your point, they want to see the action
That's
items
right.
too. I mean, it's all good to have surveys or to be asked things, but if they don't see actions coming out of them,
Correct.
it can go the opposite way, right? People will get discouraged because why am I doing this if nothing's gonna come of it, so.
I love that that's part of your plan.
Yeah, so these were some of the considerations that I really reflected on after thinking about the feedback as a whole. Again, you heard flexibility come up multiple times. We know that that's an issue with just the workforce in general, leaning in that direction with flexibility. It's tough to do that in an educational environment, so we have to be more reflective on that and just hear the feedback and continue to work through that piece. Thinking about how we can further engage experienced teachers in supporting new teachers. One of the ideas that I reflected on with one of the participants was at maybe having at our opening orientation where all of our new staff are together, bringing in some of those more veteran teachers to talk about, okay, when you were in your first year, these are the things you struggled with work-life balance. And at this point, these are the things that you've learned, and how can we help those new teachers to learn from what those veteran teachers found out over the last, however many years they've been working on it. We talked about, or one of the other questions was, what professional growth trajectories do we have for both teachers and non-teachers? So as we talked about this earlier, one of the things that really became apparent to me was, in certain roles, there are very clear trajectories to leadership. In other roles, there aren't clear paths. And so some of those, the staff members that I met with were really struggling with seeing their path. So we talked about, could we create shadowing opportunities? Maybe you don't know what another department does, and you're not going to apply for that job if you don't know what those responsibilities are. Let's give people the opportunity to get out and see something different, so that when those opportunities arise, they can feel confident in their interest.
That's good.
What leadership opportunities can we offer all staff? We just talked about that. How do we ensure training for new special ed staff? It's been nice with the stay interviews to also cross-check some of this data with some of the other information we're getting. I know Sue's been doing a lot of work with different teams in special education, and we have some new things that we're hoping to roll out to try to get more support to our new special education staff. And then how do we ensure proper training and support for classified staff? This has been on our mind for quite some time, and we've made some adjustments over the last couple of years, but I'm happy to share that one of the things Denise Brown has been working really hard on is a classified orientation reboot.
Good.
We did some of that last year, and it was kind of hit or miss in terms of how well it resonated. She's got an amazing new plan that hopefully I'll be able to share at the workshop next month for a different type of rollout for that classified orientation. And then also thinking about, how do we support people long-term? It's not just about those days where we come together and give you a million pieces of information about here's your job, but that whole first year, how are we continuing to support them in their onboarding to their positions? And then finally, we, at our last admin meeting, did a gap analysis with the information. So Kara, I know you had a question about this. The way that we did the gap analysis was, I took the information that I shared with you, and then I also took each individual question and did a little bit more of a deep dive for our administrators. So they got the percentages, but they also got some more specific information about what was shared within each question. So they went through that, they analyzed it, and then they looked at, they picked out some focus areas, because one of the things I also shared with all the participants is, as much as we value their feedback, we know we aren't going to be able to do everything, right? So we try to level set with that. So having the administrators think about the information from their own experiences and what are the areas where we really could focus. So they picked out a focus area, and then they looked at what's our current reality with that focus area and where do we want to be, what's our desired outcome, and where's the gap. So they came up with then some action steps from that more specific information from each of the questions. So we're analyzing that information right now. A few things that I pulled out that as I was going through the data stood out to me was to help with that, the meetings and maybe some of our staff not always feeling like they were the most beneficial, being more thoughtful and planful about what's the content of this meeting and who really needs to be here, who can be excused from the meeting. Could maybe even just get the notes, and if it's something that they need to reference, they can do that later. We also talked a little bit about modeling that work-life balance, which is really hard for administrators to do, but really, having that period of time where we shut down in the evenings and we're not sending emails and we're not texting our staff. So modeling those good practices with work-life balance. And we've already done some of these things like PD over the summer, shutting that down so that our people, our staff members have a time to really disconnect from the work and refresh before they come back to school. So those are just a few of the things that we were talking about. As I've already said, we plan to take the information, share it back out with not only the stay interview participants, but district-wide, so that everybody gets to hear what's going on and what our next steps are. And then my hope is to also review our current practice and how stay interviews were implemented this year, to decide if we need to adjust the process anymore. We've talked about, do we want to include more administrators in conducting stay interviews? I do feel like hearing the information firsthand is really powerful. it's also harder to kind of put it together in terms of patterns and,
Right.
and that sort of thing. So there's pros and cons. So we'll keep thinking through that, but I plan to continue to do them. I think we'll continue to build our data set with the information, and it'll just help us to be making really good decisions moving forward to hopefully retain our staff.
It's important to see the trends,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, by doing that, you can react more quickly if you start seeing changes, right, to that. So that's great.
I went out to see if there were national surveys like this, and I think we trend very much like the two that I was able to find out.
Yeah, did you look at Gallup?
I looked at Gallup, and then CES or something like that had done, reported
Yeah.
on one.
Yeah, a lot of the themes from here are from Gallup, so.
Okay.
Did, when you were doing interviews, did anybody have like, I'm struggling with this, or I wish this would improve, and I have this idea?
Yeah, there was
Consider.
there was quite a lot of that. That's why I feel like they were thoughtful and
That's
prepared
wonderful.
coming into the interviews. Most of the interviews lasted between 45 minutes and an hour. So we had really great conversation. I wish I could capture like every little bit of information that they shared, but they were very thoughtful and definitely came like with a solution. If they had a problem, they tried to come up with a solution.
Well, and the reason I ask that is that I've learned through my career that sometimes it's the people doing the work who can have the best idea how to solve the problem.
Of course.
So,
Yep.
yeah, I think this is amazing. I love that I knew this had to be a lot of time that you took for 34 interviews, and you were very thoughtful yourself in capturing this, and there was a lot of open-ended questions for 34 people, so I applaud that work. And it seems like you got a lot of really valuable data.
Definitely. Appreciate the people who participated too. Took the risk.
Oh, yes.
You know, to come
Yeah.
in
Be
face to
vulnerable.
face and definitely, you know, share that feedback with us. But they were awesome.
And that's why it's important to get it out to the
Yeah.
entire district.
That's right.
Right, so that's how you start building that culture of being able to approach people. So,
Absolutely.
it's great.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mrs. Wood? Thank you so much. And we'll move to director reports and discussions, and first is Mr. Starkey with communications.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, happy to be here tonight. So as you're aware, Dr. Deagle, Mrs. Elliott, myself meet with our middle school and high school superintendents Student Advisory Council throughout the year. And so tonight I wanted to highlight what we've been working on during the year. So as a refresher on these two groups, they represent all 4 of our secondary buildings. We have student representatives from each building. And up to this year, they've been a sounding board for us. They've given great feedback on different district initiatives or building initiatives, as well as just giving us a student voice from our buildings. And they've done a great job of being representatives for their peers and their buildings and bringing feedback to us at the district level. And so this year, under Dr. Deagle's leadership, we were having conversations about how do we take their impact past just their buildings and their peers. And so we were really looking for how can we bring their service to our community outside of our buildings. And so last fall during our first meeting of the year, we talked to them about different service opportunities, and we conducted a survey with them to see what they're interested in. What avenues of our community do they want to help with? And from there, we distilled the responses down to 3 different categories that were sort of the top vote getters per se for this survey. The first was litter cleanup, keeping our streets and communities clean. The second was assisting those less fortunate, and that's was geared more towards things through grant and things like that, helping with meal assistance for those in our community who need it. And then the third bucket I sort of labeled as green efforts. So some mentioned like recycling drives, others mentioned helping parks, things like that. So those are sort of the 3 categories that we identified that a majority of our students were interested in helping in our community. And so from there, we sort of went to our community and identified 3 sort of field experts in those 3 areas. And during our December meeting, they came to the middle school group and the high school group and sort of pitched their ideas. So we had our students were able to hear from Make Your Hand Yours for their spring litter cleanup. They were able to hear about opportunities with GRIN either in terms of school food drives or the community bag drop, supply pickup, those sorts of things. And then they also heard from Gahanna Parks and Rec Department on different opportunities to get involved in Parks and Rec. They talked about things like trail maintenance or trail installation, tree plantings, getting involved with Arbor Day celebrations, things like that. So it was a great experience for the students because then we were able to deliberate and have conversations amongst the two different groups to see, okay, now you've heard 3 real life opportunities to get involved in your community, and let's have discussions on which ones that you guys really want to dive into. And so one of the coolest things was they decided we'd like to try and tackle 2. And so coming out of those meetings, we have the intention to all, it's on a Saturday morning, so whoever's available as part of these 2 groups will be able to sign up and assist with the Make Gahanna Yours litter cleanup. And so they thought that it was a great opportunity to lend their manpower as students in our community, and they were saying, can we bring our friends, can we bring our families? And the answer was, of course, yes. Not going to turn away helpful hands. And so this is their way to lend their manpower to an opportunity that was already established. They didn't have to do much planning, it was just getting it on their calendars and sign up. But then they wanted to tackle a project that they could kind of own, that they could be the mastermind, so to speak, behind the project. And so during our meeting 2 weeks ago, we brought back our Parks and Rec department from here in Gahanna and talked about a project that the students could own and be a big part of. And so it was a great conversation, and where we landed is the plan is to plant 12 trees between Hanna Park and Friendship Park to represent our 12 buildings, including our preschool and our district. And that was sort of their way to help our community, but also represent our district, to represent all of our buildings. And so that will be in April, and obviously we're working with Parks and Rec on locations, and they're gonna order the trees for us, and they'll get the sites prepared. And so on a day in April, we'll have our middle school students at one site planting trees in the morning, and then our high school students at the other site planting trees in the afternoon. And then in addition to that, we had conversations about how do we use this to just continue to raise awareness, because clearly what I term as green efforts was a priority for the students, and so they'll continue to work with Parks and Rec on ways, whether it's facts about trees or just facts about the project, what the project was, those sorts of things, and then we'll work on ways to get that out to our students and our families. So we talked about as we're out there planting trees, we grab a couple of the students and they can be do sort of on-camera snippets that we can then put on building morning announcements. And so it can be during the Middle School West announcements saying, hey everyone, we're here at Friendship Park and we've planted trees, and whether it be a middle school, here's your middle school representative tree, those sorts of things. So it's been a great partnership with Parks and Rec, and excited to get to it next month. And so that's just what we've been working on this year. I think it's something that we'll continue to do. I think the students love being representatives for their buildings and their peers and bringing feedback, but it's really been an added evolution to this group to be able to take their talents and have them be representatives of not only their building but our district. So I think we'll continue to work on that. Any questions?
Love it.
Exciting work,
Yeah.
it's exciting.
Very exciting.
I think what it's, okay.
Some students, when all is said and done, we will have had them 8 years. Because they started in the 5th grade, we no longer do the elementary level, but it's just really neat to have the same students come back year and year. We're really forging some relationships, and them with each other.
I think that it kind of just bleeds over into, if you look at all on what's on social for the different schools, I mean, we're creating an environment of empathy and giving back, which I think for the kids is very important. And I think all of our buildings do a really good job with that, but it just kind of helps reinforce it over and over again. And get them when they're young. I mean, that's when you really can get them into that kind of service mode and think about other things too and how they can have a positive impact. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Reed, I have you down for the human resources, but I think you already did the statement. And I just wanted to make sure you didn't have something bonus.
I can keep talking.
No. Totally up to you. We always like hearing from you. Next is Mr. Blackwell with technology.
Good evening, President Coates, members of the board. Today I have a few updates about some of the things that we'll be placing on the agenda for your approval soon. The first one is the purchase of the security cameras for the new high school. This is something we've been working on for a long time, going through all of those floor plans, looking at all those cameras and making sure that the models make sense and that the locations make sense, so we don't have too many or too few in any given area. Working through that with Rusili. And these are owner-furnished items that are installed by Rusili subcontractors, but then they're also configured by the vendor that we're purchasing them from. So it's kind of a shared responsibility. And in total, not including the stadium, the high school will have 316 security cameras. The other large purchase we have coming up is the network switches for the new building, which is probably, from our point of view, one of the most important purchases for the building. So those do provide that network infrastructure. They provide the power and connectivity to the Wi-Fi access points, the phones, the cameras, as well as the basic connectivity for our desktop computers, HVAC systems, printers, PA systems, and of course our interactive TVs like that.
Yeah.
There are going to be 50 of these switches spread across 14 technology closets that will provide almost 2,500 Ethernet ports for us to plug into to support all of those things. And one last item is that back in November, we approved our membership in the EdTech Leaders Alliance, so they can help us with those data processing agreements with our vendors to ensure that we comply with state and federal law. And we have 15 of those queued up and ready for us to sign, and we plan to have those on the agenda for your approval.
A lot of work.
Yeah, that's all I have for tonight.
Any questions for Mr. Blackwell?
Just out of curiosity, how many cameras do we have in the current high school?
I don't know. I think it's around 2,
Yeah, okay.
including Clark Hall.
Maybe question.
Just the cameras, I feel like the parents are really, really appreciative of that when they hear the number. You've been talking about the numbers and it's so important and all the variables that you're balancing, and so it's just really reassuring, and we appreciate that. Really do. It's important.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Next, we have a special education update from Mrs. Loretta.
I was going to do the same thing. I was going to say, turn around my friend. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight about an exciting advancement for our low incidence programming at the elementary and middle school level. After a year-plus long study and a successful 2-month pilot, we're eager for next year to have 17 intervention specialists implement a curriculum called Encore. It's a comprehensive, adapted, and modified curriculum for grades K through 8. It'll be utilized by over 150 students. Encore, which was developed by Teach Town, was unanimously selected by our vetting team after research, a site visit, and in-house pilot. The curriculum provides our intervention specialists with a structured, sequential program aligned with our state standards and is also endorsed by the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce as a highly qualified instructional material. It ensures consistency in instruction, allows for differentiation, and really meets our needs of our diverse learners. In elementary, we have units that will support ELA, math, science, and social studies. All the units are anchored in engaging fiction and nonfiction text, and lessons are scripted and differentiated at 3 different levels. Middle school will have adapted chapter books and companion text for each unit, and specific studies will include earth science, life science, physical science, U.S. history, world history, civics, and government, while incorporating the ELA and math standards. We will also provide intervention tools that are a part of Encore from Teach Town called Basics, social skill training, and transitions. They'll support students in their specially designed instruction and provide independent practice for students. In February, during our PD day, we introduced this to the intervention specialists, and the pilot team talked to them about their insights. They included how much planning time they got back by trialing this curriculum.
This is good.
They
Yeah.
shared it reduced their stress, it increased their confidence as a teacher, and most importantly, all students made progress, everyone. One teacher specifically shared, "I'm such a better teacher and so much happier. My husband has noticed it too."
I feel like there's direct results from
Right.
the state interviews that connect to that.
Yeah.
Well, this connected to our special ed review as well that we did this year.
The staff were very receptive and they're excited about learning this tool for next year. Last month, principals were introduced to and informed of this curricular tool. In August, classroom libraries, manipulatives, and student subscriptions will be distributed. Families will be introduced to the new curriculum, and we will share with them what they can expect as their child's experience. In the fall, paraprofessionals will receive professional development, so they know how to support classroom implementation. Training and phased implementation, including coaching from our Teach Town partners, will happen between September and February for full implementation to be expected in February of 26. Throughout the year, we're going to analyze the implementation, develop a sustainability plan for staff support, and identify what changes we need to put in place for year 2. So tonight I'm asking for your support in approving the purchase of Encore. You'll see on future board agendas my request to make these purchases over a number of months. Since first we'll be purchasing classroom supplies and materials at an approximate cost of $70,000, then classroom libraries at a cost of $62,000, and finally this summer we'll be purchasing the actual teacher curricular tools, the lesson plans, the assessment tools, and the student subscriptions at a cost of $37,000. Ongoing costs will include replacing any new or needed materials, and then the annual student subscription, which is actually how teachers access the curricular tools, is through a per student subscription. We don't pay per teacher. The curriculum will provide our students with a high-quality research-based instruction tailored to their needs, and will ensure that they receive the education they deserve. We've known about this need for a number of years. We've been studying this for a long time. We've already reallocated funds into our budget, both for the initial purchase and for ongoing purchases. We're not asking for new money. We have a sustainability plan for this for long term. So thank you for your consideration as we move forward with this. Also, as you may have seen in the email shared with you earlier today from Tiffany Hanna, this year marks our 15th year celebrating Spread the Word. It's also a very particularly special year as it will be Tiffany's final one before her retirement. And we just cannot thank her enough for her remarkable accomplishments and her lasting impact that she's made. This year, the theme is Every Voice Counts, and we are adding, as you saw, the community viewing of Out of My Mind. It's exciting because the author, Sharon Draper, will be there virtually to kick off the event. Also on March 26th, in the main gym at the high school, between 11:30 to 2, we'll have our traditional wheelchair basketball, an inclusive art project, various games and activities to support disability awareness. Finally, I just wanted to thank you for your focus on our current state budget. I know some of you, Dr. Deagle and Mr. Hetzel, will be hosting the school funding conversation next week. And tonight I want to share a concern with the ongoing challenges with the lack of adequate funding for special education from the state of Ohio. The rising costs of providing special education and related services such as speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, behavior supports, transportation, and instructional resources are outpacing the funding we receive. Costs to provide special education services continue to increase, and both the current and the proposed funding formula continue to increase our deficit, leaving districts struggling to meet the needs of some of the most vulnerable students. So I'm thinking about what might be the impact on our students, specifically if the state funding decreases. It could mean that a child with complex learning needs who thrive when provided a prescriptive multisensory instruction targeted to teach them to read would need to share intervention specialists with possibly twice as many students. Or a student who requires assistive technology to communicate may have a delay in having access to those updated tools or devices due to budget constraints. or even consider the impact on a student socially who requires adult support during extracurricular activities in order to access safely and fully participate, but there are no after-school supports due to funding shortfalls. These are not hypothetical situations, this is the reality we're facing. When special education is underfunded by a 250% difference of what it truly costs to educate a student, it is the student and the overburdened staff who suffer. Without proper resources, student progress may be slow, independence may be hindered, and full potential may remain unfulfilled. Federal and state law mandates we provide a free, appropriate public education to every student in the state of Ohio, but without adequate funding, that mandate creates impossible challenges. We must either divert resources from general education, impacting all students, or find ourselves focused on reducing other essential services, which isn't an option that we should ethically or legally accept. The number of students with disabilities, both nationally and within our district, are increasing, resulting in staff also needing to increase. Our students deserve quality services, and their success is our responsibility, and without necessary funding, we're setting up for failure. So I just want to thank you for your support that you have provided to our students in our district, and for your continued support for this fight in equitable funding, your advocacy for a funding model that reflects the true cost of educating students with disabilities, and continuing to ensure no Gahanna student's future is compromised due to financial constraints is vital. And we just appreciate the focus you have on this area. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing all of that. We're gonna continue to meet with PTOs and PTAs, and this gives us even more information to share on the dire need that is ahead of us. And even though I provided testimony, I'm writing the emails and making calls, and that this is additional information we can provide. So thank you for providing this. This is valuable data.
Would you repeat the 250% cost?
Because you know what the numbers,
Definitely.
we heard the others part too, but.
Yeah, so special education, according to our funding formula, is funded at a 250% difference of what it truly costs to educate a student.
This
So
comes
it's sort
from,
of cost versus funding.
this comes from that study I've referenced a few times, I think in the last year, where a group of, VASA and other public education leadership entities commissioned a study to see how underfunded special ed is for public schools, and they found the delta to be 250%.
Okay, that's amazing.
Thank you.
And just a quick question, you mentioned the numbers are increasing nationally. Where was that info from?
I'm sorry.
The numbers were increasing
Special ed students.
nationally for special ed students?
So we have that national data from the federal level and the state level.
Okay,
And then our own increase from, was it October we took, or was it September? Sue, do you remember? I know
We did September.
September, EL was October. So from September to September, we saw a 7% increase from last year to this year. In EL, from October, to October, we saw a 16% increase.
So, Ryan would ask that question. This is more directed to my board member peers, but, so I did my emails to legislators yesterday focusing on the fact that in essence, with House Bill 920, they don't let inflation impact our revenue. And in essence, this proposed bill is anti-inflationary as well, yet all of our expenses are inflationary. And then I listed some unfunded mandates that then also eat into that. Maybe one of our members should take up the special education subject matter to be a focus.
Additional layer for
Right.
them to.
Yeah,
Yeah, because we need to hit different topics.
right. Or I can send another one in a week, but
Yeah.
somebody should maybe get a copy of this so that we can.
I would gladly do that if you want to send
Sure.
me more, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Can I ask you two some questions? I think you covered the Onward program, is that correct?
On
The
board.
On board, okay, thank you. I'm like really struggling over here with this, sorry.
That's my life.
Who, like, are you talking about with our special education population? Are you looking at everybody?
Low
It's gonna
incidence
use that?
population. So traditionally, our students who you would consider multiple disability, autism and intellectual disability.
Okay, and so is that typically then in a self-contained classroom?
It is,
Or you, okay,
so students primarily would be provided the instruction in a small group resource classroom, although the materials are aligned to our state standards, so that curricular tools could be taken into their home general education classrooms.
okay. And you said K through 8?
Go through 8.
K through 8. So do you have, and it can be a ballpark or you can get back with us, about how many kids you believe that?
150.
Okay. Any other questions?
And is that across all grade levels?
K-8.
K-8? K-8.
Final question?
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that concludes the March 6th board workshop. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Thank you, Mrs. Dimmerly. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. Mr. Hutzel, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Dimmerly?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. 7:21 and we are adjourned.